was home alone. My apartment, small and quiet, had always been a refuge for me. The peace of being alone in the stillness of the night was something I had always cherished. But recently, that peace had been slowly replaced by an overwhelming sense of unease. At first, the strange noises I heard each night seemed like nothing more than the wind or the old pipes of the building groaning and shifting. But soon, the sounds started coming at the same time every night. Just a quiet clicking sound, rhythmic, like a clock ticking, never changing. Tick, tick, tick. It was so consistent, so deliberate, that it began to gnaw at me. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was the house settling, or perhaps the neighbors were just doing something in the hallway. But each night, the clicking grew louder in my mind, and eventually, I couldn't ignore it. I became obsessed with it. Where was it coming from? Why did it always start at the same time? But I couldn't bring myself to open the door and look. I was too afraid of what I might find. So, each night, I just laid there in my bed, trying to ignore it, trying to sleep. But it was always there. Tick, tick, tick. I couldn't get it out of my head. My mind raced with thoughts. Why only at night? Why every night? I sat up in bed, heart pounding, my hands shaking. I listened intently, but the sound wouldn't stop. It filled the room, louder now, almost like it would never end. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but deep inside, a growing sense of fear took hold of me. The next morning, I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind and went about my day. Work was a distraction, but as evening came and the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt it again, the familiar sense of dread. And that's when I noticed it. A small, crumpled piece of paper wedged into the crack under my door. It was dirty and the edges were torn. My stomach dropped as I slowly picked it up. I read it aloud to myself, my voice shaking. Why didn't you open the door last night? I froze. My mind raced. Who could have written this? I didn't know anyone in the building. My family lived far away, and I rarely saw my neighbors. The paper didn't seem like a prank, though. Something about it felt real, and that made my skin crawl. I tossed the paper into the trash, but the chill of those words stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone I didn't know was watching me. That night, as I lay in bed, the clicking sound began again. It was exactly the same, that rhythmic tap tap tap. I tried to convince myself that I was just imagining it, that it was all in my head. But the sound kept going, filling the apartment with its heavy presence. I slowly got up, my heart pounding. I considered looking through the peephole. Maybe I could catch a glimpse of whoever wore whatever was causing it. But when I peered through, there was no one there, just darkness. But then, something else caught my eye. Another piece of paper, just like the last one, wedged under the door. My hands trembled as I bent down to pick it up. I was terrified, yet somehow I had to know what it said. I opened it slowly and read the chilling words. You can see me, but I won't let you open the door. I could feel my breath catch in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind, but it felt like I was teetering on the edge. What was happening? Who was doing this to me? I staggered back, my pulse racing. In a haze of panic, I stumbled to the back of my apartment, seeking refuge in my bedroom. But then, something caught my eye through the window. There, at the corner of the building, I saw a man. He was standing perfectly still, staring at me. His eyes were fixed on mine, unblinking. I froze. For what felt like an eternity, we locked eyes. My heart thudded in my chest. Then, without a word, I rushed to pull the curtain shut. My hands were slick with sweat, my body trembling. Who was he? Why was he watching me? The questions were like daggers in my mind. The next day, I tried to call the police, but my phone didn't work. The signal was gone, and then the screen shut off without warning. After a few minutes, I turned it back on. To my horror, I saw a message. You were awake when you heard me, weren't you? My skin went cold. I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. No one was outside. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt it deep in my bones. Someone was here. Someone was watching me. That night, the clicking returned. But it wasn't just a click this time. It was heavier, slower, like footsteps pressing against the door. Tap, tap, slow, deliberate. It sounded like someone was standing right on the other side, waiting. I could feel the tension building inside me. I didn't know what to do, but something in me opened the door. I had to know, I had to see. I swung it open, expecting to find nothing. But there was something more terrifying than I could have imagined. There was no one there, but through the peephole I saw it. A piece of paper falling to the ground. I leaned forward, my heart hammering. I read the words on the paper. You were waiting for me. Now, I'm waiting for you. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my legs go weak. I didn't know what to do. My whole body froze, as though I had become a statue. I stumbled backward, heart racing. That was when I realized that something was terribly wrong. I wasn't just scared, I was afraid of something that shouldn't be real. Something that couldn't be real. As I moved away from the door, I felt a creeping sensation deep within my chest. A coldness, a sense of inevitability. I heard something then, a whisper deep, rasping, and terrifying. It wasn't just in my ear, it came from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the air itself. I wanted to look, I wanted to turn around, but I couldn't. Because the whisper, the noise, it wasn't just coming from behind the door anymore. It was echoing through every corner of my apartment. And in that moment, I understood. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape. Someone knew something was watching me, and it would never stop. It was a quiet evening when it all started. I was home alone, just like I always am. The clock showed nearly midnight, and the house was perfectly still, save for the howling wind that rattled the windows. I was sitting on the couch, lost in a TV show. Time seemed to slip by unnoticed. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize the area code, so I hesitated before opening it. But curiosity got the best of me. As I read the message, my blood ran cold. I'm watching you from the window. I froze. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't think. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't quite figure out why. My heart started to race. I glanced at the phone again, trying to make sense of it, but it just kept bothering me. Without thinking, I quickly went to the window and opened the curtains. The street outside was empty. The sky had darkened, and the street lamps illuminated the quiet, empty road. No one was around. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief. Everything seemed fine. Everything seemed normal again. But that wasn't the end of it. That night, as I tried to get back to the TV, another message popped up on my phone. I opened it, and it was simple, but it sent a chill down my spine. You can look again, I'm watching you. I don't know why, but I felt a growing sense of dread. My mind was racing. Slowly, I scanned the area outside the window once more. Everything was still. The wind hummed softly through the trees. Nothing moved. But then I realized something. The street looked just like it always did. The mailbox, the doorbell, everything was in its place. Nothing was out of the ordinary. But something about it felt off, like there was an undercurrent of unease I couldn't shake. I grabbed my phone again, and instinctively, I checked the security cameras around the house. The feed appeared normal. The street outside was calm, still, empty. But then, just as the second message came through, I saw something move in front of the window. A figure, passing quickly. It disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. I rewound the footage, my eyes fixed on the screen, and the figure flickered again. It was gone before I could register it properly. I rewound once more. This time, I saw it clearly, a figure, standing directly in front of the window. The strange thing was, the person's eyes seemed to be locked on me. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the screen. There was something unsettling in their gaze, something dark and empty. The figure vanished, but my heart didn't slow down. I turned back to my phone, hoping for some kind of explanation, and there it was. A new message. I'm watching you now. You've started seeing me, haven't you? I froze. My mind was racing. I couldn't understand what was happening. Who was this person? Why were they doing this? I set the phone down, quickly glancing outside again, but the street was as dark and empty as before. The air was thick with the kind of silence that made everything feel wrong. I grabbed my phone again, almost desperate for something to explain this away, but the new message that popped up didn't help. It only made my fear grow. I'm watching you now. I'll be with you at all times. I couldn't take it anymore. I checked the camera feed one last time, but this time, something was different. The footage had been wiped clean. Every frame was gone. The cameras had erased everything, leaving only a blank screen. Panic set in. It was as though someone had breached my home. I locked the door, my hands trembling, and kept my eyes on the window. But then, I saw it. A dark figure, standing just outside the window. The shape was human, but it was almost swallowed by the darkness surrounding it. I squinted, trying to make out any details, but I couldn't. All I could see were two eyes, pale, empty, and staring directly at me. It was like the darkness itself had taken shape. I stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to do. And then, just as I was about to turn away, a new message arrived on my phone. I'm waiting for you to open the door. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze. I couldn't move. I locked the door again, just to be sure, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I wanted to look outside, to see if the figure was still there, but at the same time, I didn't want to. After a few seconds of indecision, I found myself walking back toward the window, unable to resist the urge to check again, but the figure was gone. There was no sign of it outside. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I was just imagining things. But then, I saw it. A fingerprint, smeared on the glass. It was right there, in the exact place where I had seen the figure last. That's when the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a hammer striking metal. My heart stopped. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to open the door, but I had no choice. I approached the door, my hands shaking, my mind screaming at me to stop. I turned the handle, and then I opened it. And there it was. A face I knew all too well. But it was wrong. Its eyes were completely white, empty. my heart skipped a beat. I felt as though I was falling into those eyes, lost in their depth. My breath caught, and in that moment, I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. My entire body was frozen in fear. Just then, my phone vibrated. I glanced at it, barely able to move, and read the message. "I'll be with you everywhere, at all times." And then, in the silence, I heard it. A whisper, a soft, low murmur. The footsteps of the person outside. But something had changed. I didn't hear them outside anymore. No, now, I felt them. I felt them inside me. I left the apartment that day, convinced that I would never return. I found a new place in a different part of town, much nicer and certainly newer. It was quiet, peaceful, everything the old apartment wasn't. I thought the nightmare was over. I thought I was safe. But you can never fully escape a place like that. The memories linger, even when you try to bury them. They follow you, crawl under your skin like a shadow you can't shake. I tried to forget about the apartment, about the figure with the unnerving smile. But a few nights after moving into the new place, it started again. It began innocently enough. Just like before, I settled into a new routine. Work, TV, bed. But one evening, as I laid down to sleep, something felt off. The room was too quiet, the air too still. I dismissed the feeling, told myself I was being paranoid, but as I closed my eyes, I heard it. A faint creak. The sound was so subtle, but unmistakable. My heart raced in an instant, memories flooding back. I lay there, stiff as a board, trying not to make a sound. My eyes snapped open. There was no one under the bed, no figure standing in the corner of the room, but the weight of the silence felt suffocating. Then came the breathing. It was barely audible at first, like someone exhaling through a thin cloth, but it grew louder and deeper, like someone was standing just outside my door, waiting. The sounds were so familiar, yet somehow more chilling this time, as if they were aware of me, watching me, ... I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't move. I turned on the light and scanned the room. No shadows, no movements, just the ordinary quiet of my new place. I even checked under the bed, nothing. But as I was about to relax, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The dust. It had been disturbed, just like before. But this time, there were no footprints. There were faint smudges, almost like something had crawled in and out, but there were no distinct marks. It was as if something invisible had been there, something that shouldn't have been. I shook my head. This was impossible. I was just imagining things. It had to be. That night, I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The sounds didn't stop. The creaks continued, followed by the faint, chilling breath. I couldn't handle it. My phone was already in my hand before I realized what I was doing. I hit the record button and shoved it under the bed, just like last time. Maybe I'd finally get some answers. This time, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening. It felt like the night was never ending, the air thick with something I couldn't name. As the hours passed, the breathing came again, closer, faster, deeper. It was like someone was getting closer, inching toward me, just out of my sight. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. "You can't escape me." I froze. The voice was familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was cold, hollow, as if it had come from somewhere far darker than I could understand. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking, and played back the footage. There, in the dim light, I saw it again. A figure crawled out from under the bed, its movements jerky, unnatural. This time, though, it wasn't just crawling towards me. It was dragging something behind it. Something that seemed to slip and slide across the floor like it was weightless. The figure's eyes, those eyes, they were large, black, and empty, and this time they weren't staring at the camera. They were staring at me. The smile twisted slowly across its face, wider than ever before, and then it opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Its tongue flicked out like it was tasting the air, and the sound it made was sickening wet, as if its mouth was never meant to speak. I slammed the phone down and ran to the door. I couldn't stay in this place. I needed to leave, but I didn't know where to go anymore. It was following me. Whatever it was, it had followed me from the old apartment. I bolted out of my apartment, slammed the door behind me, and went downstairs, pacing frantically. I couldn't even think straight. It had been quiet, too quiet for too long. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, waiting for me to return. And that's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming from the hallway, each one echoing louder as it neared. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen, but the footsteps stopped just short of my door. Then came the whisper again. "You can't outrun me." I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. My only option was to keep moving. I ran outside into the cold night, not looking back, not stopping until I found myself standing at the edge of the city. I didn't care where I was anymore. I just needed to get away. But as I stood there, gasping for air, a thought crossed my mind, something I hadn't considered before. What if it wasn't the apartment? What if it was me? I turned and looked at the dark streets behind me. The wind had picked up, howling through the empty roads. And that's when I saw it, a shadow, moving just at the corner of my vision. I spun around, my heart racing. It was there, the figure, and it was smiling. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the sound of heavy breathing right behind me.